Under the fading shadow of the Cold War, one question echoed inside the walls of the Pentagon: what would the next war look like? And more importantly, how could it be won before the enemy even saw it coming? The world was changing. The Soviet Union, although nearing collapse, had already demonstrated its capability to challenge US air dominance with highly capable aircraft like the MiG-29 and Su-27. These were no longer second-rate copies. They were fast, agile, and deadly. For the United States, maintaining aerial superiority was not just a matter of national pride, it was strategic survival. The skies had always been the high ground. Losing them would mean giving up the advantage in every future conflict. For more deep, untold stories behind the most advanced aircraft ever built, subscribe now and never miss what's next. That's why, in the early 1980s, the US Department of Defense initiated what would become one of the most ambitious fighter development programs in modern history. Its name was the Advanced Tactical Fighter, or ATF. The mission was clear but extremely demanding. Design a fighter jet that could maintain air dominance well into the 21st century, outflying, outstealthing, and outthinking any rival. This aircraft had to fly at supersonic speeds without afterburners, avoid detection by radar, dominate dogfights with maneuverability unmatched by anything in existence, and seamlessly fuse information from multiple onboard and offboard sources. It had to be more than a jet. It had to be a revolution. And so began a quiet competition between two defense giants: Northrop McDonnell Douglas with their sleek, futuristic YF-23, and Lockheed Martin, partnering with Boeing and General Dynamics, with the more conventional-looking but extremely agile YF-22. What followed was an intense period of development and testing. Both prototypes were flown, scrutinized, and dissected. The YF-23 impressed with its stealth profile and straight-line speed, but it was the YF-22 that won the contract. It offered superior maneuverability, better avionics integration, and a more versatile platform for upgrades and evolution. In 1991, after years of engineering refinement and budget negotiations, the US government made its choice. The YF-22 would go on to become the F-22 Raptor. But choosing the airframe was only the beginning. Turning this concept into a combat-ready aircraft meant solving technical challenges that no previous fighter had ever faced. Engineers had to design an airframe that could minimize radar returns from all angles, including the notoriously difficult side and rear aspects. The solution was a carefully sculpted blend of angular surfaces, internal weapons bays, edge alignment, and radar-absorbing materials. Every panel, every seam, every bolt had to contribute to stealth and not compromise it. Even the engine nozzles were redesigned with flat, slotted exhausts to reduce infrared signature and radar reflection. While the airframe grabbed attention, the real innovation was unfolding inside. The F-22 would be the first fighter aircraft to feature true sensor fusion, where data from radar, infrared, electronic warfare systems, and onboard processing units were combined into a single, coherent picture for the pilot. This meant that the Raptor could identify, track, and engage multiple targets without clutter or confusion, and without broadcasting its position to enemy systems. Its radar, the AN/APG-77, was a quantum leap in capability, an active electronically scanned array, AESA, radar that could operate in low probability of intercept modes, making it nearly impossible for enemy systems to detect it was being scanned. The engines Pratt and Whitney's F-119 PW-100 were another breakthrough. They delivered enough thrust to allow the F-22 to supercruise, maintain supersonic flight without afterburners for extended periods. This gave it the ability to strike deep into contested airspace quickly and return without sacrificing fuel or exposing itself with an afterburner's thermal signature. Thrust vectoring nozzles were added for unmatched pitch control in combat maneuvers, allowing the Raptor to perform post-stall turns and instantaneous changes in direction that would be physically impossible for conventional jets. But even with all these features, the program was not without criticism. Development delays, rising costs, and shifting geopolitical priorities, especially after the fall of the Soviet Union, led some in Congress to question the need for such an advanced platform. The price per unit was high, the geopolitical landscape was changing, and without a clear adversary matching US capabilities in the skies, the urgency behind the F-22 began to fade in political circles, even as it accelerated within the defense community. Still, the US Air Force knew what it was getting. The Raptor wasn't just a step ahead, it was generations ahead. In simulated exercises, even early pre-production versions of the F-22 were defeating entire formations of legacy aircraft without being detected. In dogfights, they were untouchable. In beyond visual range engagements, they fired first, hit first, and disappeared. Every system was designed not for fair fights, but for asymmetric control of the aerial battlefield. As the first production aircraft rolled off the line in the early 2000s, the global defense landscape was already watching closely. Russia, China, and other rising military powers took note. This wasn't just a fighter jet, it was a signal that the United States intended to maintain not just superiority but absolute dominance in the air. but as powerful and advanced as the F-22 would become, it was also bound by its own time. Its development was shaped by Cold War doctrines and assumptions, even as the world transitioned into an era of asymmetric warfare, insurgencies, and counterterrorism. The Raptor had been designed to fight and win against the best jets of rival superpowers, but those jets weren't showing up, at least not yet. Still, the Raptor moved forward, slowly, carefully, and with a level of investment in stealth, integration, and lethality that made it, even before entering full service, the most feared aircraft in the skies. It wasn't built to replace older aircraft, it was built to make them obsolete. And while its enemies had yet to reveal themselves, the next challenge was already forming, taking all of this power and capability and making it sustainable in a world of shrinking budgets, rising maintenance demands, and evolving threats. The F-22 had proven it could be built, but could it endure? Could it scale? Could it remain relevant in a battlefield that was changing before its landing gear even touched the tarmac? Turning the concept of air dominance into operational reality meant pushing the limits of every known aerospace discipline. While the F-22's outline was already taking shape, the engineering work required to make that outline functional and survivable was staggering. Stealth, maneuverability, speed, and situational awareness were not standalone features. They had to function as a system, unified in purpose, without one compromising the others. That was the true challenge, and it was one no other fighter had ever solved. Stealth wasn't a bolt-on coating or a gimmick. It had to be embedded into every component. The internal weapons bays, the contour of the canopy, the placement of the engines, the precise angles of the airframe's edges. Lockheed Martin's engineers had to make trade-offs no one had attempted before. Weapons had to be hidden, which meant rethinking how missiles were loaded, carried, and fired. The F-22's side weapon bays, for example, were designed to open and fire an AIM-9X Sidewinder in under a second, fast enough to engage targets in a dogfight without exposing the aircraft to radar. The primary bay housed 6 AIM-120 AMRAAMs, allowing the jet to take out multiple threats at long range without ever revealing its position. But stealth was only the beginning. The F-22's agility had to be unmatched. To that end, its thrust vectoring engines, a capability still absent in most operational Western fighters, gave it a level of control that traditional jets could not approach. In close-range combat, the aircraft could perform post-stall maneuvers like the J-turn or the Herbst maneuver, rapidly changing direction even when traditional control surfaces were no longer effective. This meant that even if the F-22 somehow ended up in a visual range engagement, it could still outmaneuver its opponent. Its engines, the twin Pratt and Whitney F-119 PW100s, generated more than 70,000 pounds of thrust. That's enough to push the aircraft to Mach 2 when needed, though it typically cruises at around Mach 1.5 without afterburners, thanks to its supercruise capability. In comparison, most fighters require afterburners just to break the sound barrier. Supercruise meant that the Raptor could arrive at an engagement zone faster, spend less time being detected, and still have the fuel reserves to return, all while avoiding the heat signatures that give away conventional aircraft. Inside the cockpit, the pilot sat at the center of a silent battlefield, fed by a seamless stream of data. The avionics suite combined radar inputs, electronic warfare signals, infrared detection, and encrypted communications into a single synthetic picture. No more jumping between displays or mentally fusing sensor outputs. The jet did that for the pilot, prioritizing threats, suggesting courses of action, and reducing cognitive load. In fact, many pilots later reported that the biggest surprise when flying the Raptor wasn't its speed or stealth, but how easy it was to operate. It wasn't overloaded with complexity. It was filtered for clarity. The radar itself, the AN/APG-77, was revolutionary. It was the first AESA, active electronically scanned array radar, to be integrated into a fighter jet. Unlike traditional mechanical radars that scan back and forth, the AESA uses multiple radar beams simultaneously, allowing it to track multiple targets, while remaining extremely difficult to detect. In low probability of intercept mode, it can operate silently, revealing nothing about its presence or direction. Its range is classified, but estimated to exceed 150 kilometers for fighter-sized targets, well beyond visual range. Add to that an onboard electronic warfare suite capable of jamming enemy radars, decoying missile threats, and scanning for threats across multiple spectrums, and the result is a platform that sees first, shoots first, and survives. In simulations, the F-22 regularly defeated formations of legacy fighters, even when outnumbered 5 or 10 to 1. In red flag exercises, it was not uncommon for Raptors to destroy entire squadrons without being tracked or targeted. These weren't just training victories, they were proof of concept for a system that made older generations of fighters obsolete almost overnight. Another often overlooked aspect of the Raptor's design is its survivability beyond stealth. Redundancy was built into nearly every system. The aircraft could take damage, continue flying, and return to base. The cockpit was armored, the control systems could reroute around damage, and and the jet was designed to operate even in degraded conditions. Its maintenance footprint, while criticized for complexity and cost, was also carefully managed to preserve mission availability. The stealth coating, a known weak point in earlier aircraft like the F-117, was reformulated into a baked-in skin that required far less field repair. In time, maintenance protocols became streamlined, with dedicated crews trained specifically for the Raptor's needs. However, not every innovation was visible to the public. Much of the F-22's potential lay in classified systems, data links, electronic warfare capabilities, passive sensors, and upgrades designed to stay ahead of adversaries for decades. It was this hidden capability, the part that wasn't shown in air shows or press releases, that made the Raptor so formidable. It wasn't just a better fighter. It was a system designed for future wars. Wars that had not yet happened, against enemies that hadn't yet emerged. Curiously, despite all this, the F-22 never had an official combat kill. This wasn't a flaw. It was a testament to the deterrence effect of its presence. The jet was so superior that adversaries avoided it altogether. It was deployed to Syria to patrol Korean airspace and to intercept long-range bombers near U.S. borders. In each case, it arrived unseen, established dominance, and left without a shot fired. Its greatest weapon was often its silence. But even as the F-22 proved its worth in operations and exercises, a new challenge emerged, sustaining and evolving the platform in a post-Cold War world where budgets were shrinking and threats were shifting. The Air Force had its weapon, but could it afford to keep it flying into the next generation? That question would define not just the future of the Raptor, but of the entire U.S. approach to air superiority. And the answer wouldn't come from the skies, but from the halls of Congress. When the first operational F-22s entered service in 2005, the world had already changed. The Soviet Union, the original adversary for which the Raptor was built, no longer existed. The geopolitical landscape had shifted toward asymmetric warfare, low-intensity conflicts, counterinsurgency, and urban combat. In this new era, aircraft like the A-10 Warthog and drones like the MQ-1 Predator were proving more relevant than stealthy air superiority fighters, designed for nation-state wars. And so, the question emerged. Did the US really need hundreds of Raptors in a world where insurgents didn't have fighter jets? Initially, the answer seemed to be yes. The US Air Force had envisioned a fleet of 750 F-22s, enough to replace aging F-15C Eagles and guarantee air dominance for the foreseeable future. But as the 2000s progressed, the costs began to mount. Each F-22 carried a price tag of roughly $150 million, not including long-term maintenance, support infrastructure, or training. Critics began to point out the discrepancy between budget priorities and real-world utility. Why invest in a jet designed to fight threats that no longer existed? The program came under political scrutiny. In Congress, debates intensified around the budget allocations for defense. Some argued that resources would be better spent on counterinsurgency operations, unmanned systems, and lighter multi-role fighters. Others pointed to the rising costs of the F-35 program, which promised stealth, networked warfare, and multi-branch compatibility, as a reason to redirect funding away from the Raptor. In 2009, under the Obama administration, the decision was made. The F-22 production line would be shut down after just 187 operational aircraft were delivered. This was a pivotal moment. The US had just developed the most advanced air superiority fighter in history, a platform with unmatched stealth, supercruise, agility, and situational awareness, and chose to stop building it. The reasons were not technical, they were strategic and fiscal, and that created a paradox. The US Air Force had a jet that no one could match, but not enough of them to guarantee long-term global coverage. Ironically, this limited production made the F-22 even more exclusive and valuable. With only a few squadrons in existence, the aircraft became a high-value asset, deployed selectively and carefully. Every sortie was tracked, every operational detail scrutinized. The US even implemented strict export bans. Not even the closest allies, including Israel, Japan, or the UK, were allowed to purchase the Raptor. The technology was considered too sensitive, too decisive to be shared. In practice, this meant the F-22 became a strategic chess piece, rather than a frontline workhorse. It was deployed to high-threat regions not to conduct daily missions, but to signal presence and deter aggression. In 2014, Raptors were used in combat over Syria, not for dogfights, but for precision strikes and air cover. Even then, the missions were carefully managed. The jet often operated without using its radar in active mode, relying on passive sensors to maintain stealth. Its radar cross-section, smaller than a metal marble, ensured that enemy systems would detect nothing until it was too late. Despite its limited use in actual engagements, the Raptor consistently proved its value in exercises and simulations. During Red Flag and Northern Edge war games, F-22 pilots regularly achieved 30-to-1 kill ratios. In 2006, an F-22 reportedly killed an F-15 in a simulated engagement before the Eagle pilot even realized he was under threat. These weren't just training anecdotes, they were consistent demonstrations of the Raptor's overwhelming superiority in both beyond visual range and close-range combat. Yet the Raptor was also showing its age, not in performance, but in digital architecture. Built with late 1990s computing systems, the jet's onboard processors and data buses were quickly becoming outdated compared to modern cloud-connected, AI-assisted platforms. Integrating the F-22 with emerging systems, like autonomous drones or networked sensor grids, required substantial investment. Upgrades were implemented, but often at great expense and under strict limitations due to the jet's closed and compartmentalized software. Moreover, the maintenance demands of the F-22 were substantial. The aircraft required specialized hangars, unique tooling, and crews trained in stealth preservation and component calibration. The radar-absorbing materials, RAM, on the aircraft's skin, though improved from earlier stealth designs, still required time-consuming inspection and touch-ups. Availability rates hovered around 50 to 60%, meaning that at any given moment, only half of the fleet was flight-ready. For a platform that relied on exclusivity and presence, that presented a real concern. Still, the Raptor retained its role as the gold standard of air dominance. China and Russia began developing their own stealth fighters, the J-20 and Su-57 respectively, but neither has yet achieved the same level of capability, integration, or proven performance. In the international arena, the F-22 remains the aircraft by which all others are judged. And so, the U.S. Air Force faced a dilemma. It possessed a fighter jet that remained unrivaled, but whose production was permanently closed. Upgrades could extend its relevance, but only so far. Its numbers were limited, and as the years passed, attrition through accidents, aging, and wear would inevitably reduce the operational fleet even further. This situation paved the way for a new concept, not a direct replacement, but a successor in spirit and capability, one that could inherit the lessons of the F-22, fix its limitations, and prepare the U.S. for the next generation of threats. That program would be known as NGAD, Next Generation Air Dominance. But before the NGAD could even be defined, the Air Force had to wrestle with a deeper truth. The F-22 had set the bar so high that surpassing it wouldn't just require better technology, it would require a reimagining of what air superiority meant in the 21st century. Even in limited numbers, the F-22 Raptor continues to shape the global conversation around air superiority. Nearly 2 decades after it entered service, no aircraft has managed to surpass it in the one area that defines success in the air: control. Total control of the battle space. In real-world missions, simulated engagements, and strategic posturing, the Raptor remains an apex predator. But time does not pause. Not for icons, not for marvels of engineering. And while the Raptor still rules the skies today, its legacy now rests on how well it can prepare the battlefield of tomorrow. By 2020, the U.S. Air Force faced an uncomfortable truth. It had built the most advanced air superiority fighter in history, but also the most inflexible. The F-22's architecture, designed in the early 1990s, was never meant to evolve rapidly. Its software was compartmentalized, its processors outdated, and its internal systems not natively built for the connected battlefield of the modern age. Updating it meant expensive retrofitting, recertification, and sometimes physical redesigns. That didn't stop the upgrades, but it slowed them. The Air Force introduced a series of modernization programs, collectively known as the Raptor Enhancement and Sustainment Program. These upgrades improved radar performance, expanded weapons integration, upgraded communication systems, and added GPS-denied navigation tools. The F-22 could now operate in denied environments, network with newer platforms, and even engage targets with the AIM-260 Joint Advanced Tactical Missile, a next-generation long-range air-to-air weapon. But the bigger problem remained unsolved: scalability. With only around 180 Raptors left in service and operational availability below 70%, the math was unavoidable. The Raptor fleet could not be everywhere at once. It could not cover the Indo-Pacific, the Arctic, the Middle East, and Europe simultaneously. In high-intensity scenarios, every airframe mattered, and attrition was no longer theoretical. As adversaries ramped up production of next-gen fighters and missile systems, the Air Force needed not just quality, but quantity. And quantity wasn't something the F-22 could provide anymore. Meanwhile, other nations were not standing still. China's J-20 was now flying operationally. Russia continued to promote the Su-57. These jets, while not yet peer competitors to the Raptor in raw capability, were platforms being refined with urgency. Beyond hardware, integrated air defense systems, like Russia's S-400 and China's HQ-9, were extending the reach of ground-based radar and missiles. The future battlefield wouldn't just involve aircraft versus aircraft. It would be a dense, dynamic web of sensors, drones, jammers, satellites, and hypersonic weapons. In that environment, even the Raptor's dominance could be challenged. That's where the NGAD, Next Generation Air Dominance, comes in. Unlike the F-22, NGAD isn't just an aircraft. It's an ecosystem. A system of systems approach that includes a manned stealth fighter as the centerpiece, but also a network of unmanned collaborative combat aircraft, CCAs, AI-driven sensor platforms, and real-time battlefield management tools. It's designed to be modular, upgradable, and survivable in environments far beyond what the Raptor was ever intended to face. While details remain classified, what's known is that NGAD is being developed in record time. Using digital engineering, or digital twin technology, the Air Force and defense contractors can design, test, and refine prototypes entirely in the virtual domain before physical production even begins. This approach already produced a flying NGAD demonstrator by 2020, a stunning acceleration compared to traditional timelines. Crucially, NGAD incorporates lessons learned directly from the Raptor. One of the most valuable, future platforms must be born with upgradability in mind. The inability to rapidly evolve is what limited the F-22's strategic lifespan. NGAD, in contrast, is built for iteration. It's designed to adapt as threats emerge, not after, but during. Still, even as NGAD advances, the F-22 remains a frontline tool. In recent years, it's been tasked with escorting B-2 stealth bombers, intercepting Russian aircraft near Alaska, and shadowing Chinese drones and spy balloons in the Pacific. Its combination of stealth, sensors, and speed continues to make it uniquely valuable for high-priority missions that demand total control of the air. Pilots still call it the most dominant aircraft they've flown. Its reputation remains unchallenged. And for adversaries, the mere presence of a Raptor in theater changes the calculus of engagement. But it won't last forever. The Air Force has already begun discussions on retiring the F-22 in the early 2030s. Not because it has failed, but because its ceiling has been reached. It can no longer evolve fast enough to outpace threats that are accelerating at exponential rates. Stealth alone is no longer a guarantee. Supercruise is no longer unique. And the future of air combat is shifting from solo platforms to distributed teams of manned and unmanned assets fighting as a swarm. That doesn't diminish the Raptor's legacy. In fact, it amplifies it. The F-22 forced every air force in the world to change its strategy. It created a benchmark so high that it altered procurement cycles, doctrine, and threat assessments globally. Its development validated stealth as a sustainable doctrine. Its performance proved that true air dominance requires seamless integration of stealth, situational awareness, agility, and lethality. And its story, from Cold War origins to 21st century relevance, remains one of the clearest examples of how foresight and design can shape decades of strategy. As NGAD prepares to take the torch, the Raptor still flies, silently, powerfully, often unseen. It doesn't need to prove itself anymore. It did that the moment it entered the sky. Its presence changed air combat forever. And while it will one day leave service, it will never leave the doctrine it defined. The next chapter in air dominance is already being written, but it's being written on a foundation laid by the F-22 Raptor, the aircraft that taught the world what it truly means to control the sky.